I never thought I'd be making a video like this real quickly soon, but here we are. For those who want to know context, basically this year, seeing how we are no longer, or we weren't probably never going to get the big style events that we're used to, I decided to make a top 10 best and worst video, as well as explaining why I'm not picking 3 in particular, which resulted in having all of them being talked about. In this case, we are going to be talking about the other updates that has happened, basically update 24 to 28 as far as events go, and I refer to them as what is known as mini events. Now, the mini events in context is basically like a major event, except their length is like the items that are included are shortened. You get characters, I think you get 1 character, and most of the time you get the scenes just fine. Like it's usually debatable, but for the most part, like you get everything just fine, except for the last one. But you know, we're gonna go ahead and do that type of stuff. And yeah, I was hoping we'd get more than just the 5, but unfortunately we have what we work with. And seeing how the game is moving forward with this new style of content, which is I think the Monster Pass, I figure that there will probably not be a case where we see this type of thing ever again, because it doesn't make the money. So, with that in mind, with the short point of the end of 2021 going into now 2023, let's take a look at the 5 events and rank them at what was to be the best and worst mini events of all time for this game. And I guess a spoiler, if you've seen my last year's talking about the year-end reviews of content, you probably have a good idea where these rank. Because there's only one that I didn't get to talk about, and if you've seen my video on that one, you know where it's going to be. In fact, while we're at it, let's talk about it right now, because that's number 5. The worst mini update that has happened to this game was Bride of the Living Dummy. Oh dear. Yes, this event is certainly one of the most controversial of them all. So, this is the only update we have gotten that doesn't allow us to have a way to get the... well, actually, that's not the case. That's not true, but anyways, I'll digress from that. This update, what went wrong with this? Well, okay. First of all, the story. Oh god, the story. So, they decided to go ahead and take the inspiration from the actual book and take it verbatim as the update. So, basically, all the content from that, it's happening here. So, as what happened in the books happened here at the same time. And that unfortunately had some negative consequences, especially when you have the subject matter being that of a dummy going after a... I'm not going to say. But there's that. But the fact that our character we get is Jillian, who is not really the most well-known character, and probably one of the most undeserving characters, but it's what it is. I mean, at least they try to make her stand out, so I'll give it that. But, yeah, not really the best as far as that stuff goes. The other reason why this didn't really do so well was the items that they gave out. Although it looked interesting as far as uniqueness goes, it didn't really have anything to do with the book per se, and it didn't have anything to do with, like, it felt weird as a whole with everything like that. And not only that, but it was obvious that this was supposed to be a Valentine's Day update, and instead we got this at the late end of March going into April. So yeah, not the greatest in that front. But then there's also other things as well, namely that there were also some glitches that happened, namely the fact that the scenes, basically the ones that, you know, the spawn, like these characters here, they tend to have glitched out. I mean, they fixed it, of course, like, you know, everything tends to have some sort of glitch or something problems. But for the most part, yeah, it's just, everything about it just wasn't the greatest. The characters weren't great, the story was bad, the ending especially, and it just, and the fact that the scene, like one of the characters you get to use, you have to pay money for, which is like, why? You didn't have to do that before, and it's not like you needed that item from the scene in order to get it, so you could just opt out and not get them. So it's just very odd that they decided to do this, and it's just so bizarre, but, it's what it is. It happens, right? But, yeah, there's not a whole lot to say. I mean, this event speaks for itself. Oh, God. Alright, so, now we got that out of the way. I figured let's go ahead and talk about a better event. Kinda, not really so much, but better than this one in case. Number 4. Goosebumps Halloween, aka Full Moon Fever. This was one of the most bittersweet updates that happened because this was technically our final update we ever got before the game died, technically. Well, it died, but it came back. But for the most part, this game was considered to be a failure and thus never returned after that. But, that's neither here or there. The most regards of this is that this update was a bit of a mixed bag. First of all, we didn't have much of a promenade, so there's that. We did get to have a scene, so we actually got to be able to do that. Unfortunately, in order to get it, like realistically, you would have to buy into the bundle and also have to get Miss Eakins, who was exclusive behind the bundle, so that sucked. But, not only that, but it's just like, they try to put some value, like Eakins is the only one that drops maps, so that's interesting. But as far as that's concerned, the story was actually really nice. It kind of had a most fitting end to Goosebumps, if that was like, it was like an open-ended, like, left the door open, as it were, but kind of closed it partially. So it's in the sense of like, it could close, being like it's good and done, but if the game came back, which it did, they had a way out. So I felt this was a great way to end the series as it did, in the most HorrorTown way possible. And yeah, with most of the stuff here, some of the fun stuff that came out of it was just that, we finally got the kids to actually turn into monsters. We finally got Monster Marty's special form. And just everything about it just fit well within the series. But, it's one of those bittersweet moments. It's like, it's cool to see this happen before it's, in context, when it comes to the subject matter, it was weird because of just, it felt so, we had no update for the whole year of 2021. Then we got this in Halloween. And it felt kind of odd because, on one hand, it's a weird book to pick, but on the other hand, it's not that bad. But it felt like there were things missing of it, right? We didn't really have a crafting. Instead, we had to craft via the other shops there. There wasn't a whole lot of items to craft. And, it just felt like it was limited. So you can really tell that they were trying to do as much as possible. But they obviously, it didn't work out as well. I don't know why it didn't work out. It might have been just a lack of communication or God knows what. But regardless, it didn't work out the way it did. And, unfortunately, that didn't become the case, so that we actually got some more stuff. So, that's great. But yeah, for the most part, this was one of those weird things that happened thus far. But yeah, as far as that's concerned, everything else seemed pretty good. I had no complaints with it. It has pretty much, the items were easy to get, and no complaints as far as that's concerned. But yeah, it was an interesting update. It was bittersweet, but I enjoyed it for what it was. Alright, so now time to talk about some of the better ones. So let's go to the middle of the road. In third place, at number 3. Egg Monsters from Mars. This was a fitting update that was supposed to hit on April, but again, hit May. There's a pattern behavior here. And this one was really short compared to everything else. In fact, this was probably the shortest update as far as what is being offered, and pretty much fits the whole limited, exclusive mini event structure. But this was the great revival, the test, as it were, to see if this game was still alive and had a heartbeat. And fortunately, it did. And it came with an interesting little update. It wasn't the biggest update, as it, pretty much front, but it did okay for what it was. And the story had a little bit of an interesting twist. But yeah, the most part, I loved the character that they added, which was Mr. Dr. Gray. And interesting about him is that with that aspect, he was the first character got introduced that was actually made for free as far as paying him is going. So this ended up doing a tradition where most of these events had characters be available made for coins, which is cool. So long as you played this update, you got a cool character with it, so that's great. And he wasn't a bad character. I loved his little animations, his story was fun, and, the only downside was the fact that it was very short. And for the most part, it just kind of felt so meh. The one thing I will say is that I love the fact that they introduced the little Martians, the Eggies, because they certainly added some interesting concept and lore as far as things go. But for the most part, it is fun to see that these characters actually ended up coming into the fray. And for the most part, it was pretty okay. Like, it was weird to see them try to do this again with new team members and all that. And for the most part, despite it being small, I think it worked for what it was supposed to do. So, I say kudos to them. I do love the little Easter egg that they wanted to make this into a dark timeline, so that was kind of cool. But everything else about it was just kind of like, ooh. But, it was what it was. But, yeah, you can tell that this was one of those post-mortem. It also basically, this followed right after the Halloween one that we got, the last of the last, as it were. So it was interesting to see how they would, that they actually did some interesting side project thing there. Also, I do apologize on the little jump cut there. Things. But anyways, where was I? Alright. So it's quite interesting how they decided to make this into a more of a darker timeline with implications and how they kind of did that. And it was a fun little twist on the book. It's like, oh, it's like the story, but it's not. And the only downside, like I said before, is the story was really short, about 6 parts. So they didn't really get to flesh out the whole story. It was just kind of like, oh, this is happening, and then it's done. And yeah, because it followed the last event, which was the Halloween update, they had to make context of being like, okay, well, they just turned back to normal because it just went out of their system. So that answered the question of what was going on. But yeah, it was pretty much what it was. I will give it credit, though. At least they acknowledged how short this was by making fun of it, by being like, what, that's it? So, they at least poke fun, tongue-in-cheek on the whole situation, so I'll give it that one. But yeah, I got that. So let's go ahead and talk about the second one that was actually better. In second place, at number 2, Return to Horrorland. Just in time for this Halloween update of 2022, we are going back to Horrorland this time around. Although technically we didn't do it the first time because it was a carnival, but who cares? So this one is based off the book of the same name, and this time around we actually had one of the main protagonists in the game, that being Lizzie Morris, being the main character. And it just kind of followed the concept of the story, and actually felt pretty well. This felt more like a Horrorland update like it did, and it should have been. The downside is the amount of content they gave you felt like there wasn't a whole lot. And the other thing too is that this was the first update that kind of had a character animation be locked behind a paywall. So that was kind of crappy. But it was what it was. And of course there's glitches, but let's ignore that one. But, anyways, these mini events, there's been a pattern of behavior with little glitches every now and then. But, this is one of those weird, awkward periods of going from one event to another style. So, yeah. But regardless of it, the items they did introduce were fun. They were Horrorland related, and despite it being very small in concept, they at least made it feel like Horrorland, right? Like you could have made your own Horrorland with this type of stuff and used other aspects with it too. So the only downside with this is that there wasn't a whole lot you can do with it. Like I wish there was more, but yeah, it's one of those. It would have benefited if it was a bigger update, but you know, well, it's here now. Like I said, Lizzie Morris is one of the most well-known characters within the Goosebumps just because of the whole Horrorland franchise. So to have her in the game finally was actually fun. Animations, this was the first time we actually had collab. So we had characters like Lucy and Dustin interacting with Lizzie, which was fun. It was actually interesting. A little glitchy, but, you know, they tried to make it work. And, yeah, for the most part, the whole items per se were just in, like, it was okay for what they were offering. The scene itself, like the only downside is that the scene was kind of like making it more like monsters that you would see in Horrorland, like a petting zoo type of thing. But I kind of wish they actually expanded more with the horrors because, you know, with Horrorland you would expect horrors, right? But they didn't do that because, oh, well, horrors are already at Chiller's house. But those are different horrors, but whatever. It's whatever. We'll get what we get, right? Maybe when they do one day the Horrorland, maybe then they'll probably put horrors in there. But, yeah, zip my tongue. But the most aspect about this whole update is the fact that it just had some interesting ideas put out there. The story itself was actually a nice fit of trying to blend in the actual adaptation of the book and try to make it fit within Horrorland as per se. And they've also made it canonical in the book or in the game to say that Jonathan Chiller is the creator of Horrorland. For the games universe anyways. I know there's a little bit concept of we don't know who exactly made Horrorland. There's like different things like there when they Horrorland or Escape from Horrorland or no, Return to Horrorland. I don't know what it was, but one of the weird FMV games that Steven Spielberg made. You know, the one with Dracula being played by Jeff Goldblum. That one. Yeah, that one had like Jonathan Storm or something like that playing at being the creator, and then in the books they kind of name dropped somebody, but they didn't really go on it. And then they're like, you know what? The only character we know from this series is Jonathan Chiller, so screw it, he's the creator. Why not? So, yeah, it's interesting kind of lore with this type of stuff. I love the aspect of bringing the Stranges into the game, and they actually give you, like, tell you up front that these guys are just, you know, bad people right then and there. So it's like, okay, good. We, the audience, know what's going on, but the kids don't, you know. But we didn't know what in context until you find out, oh, it's for a commercial to see how cool Horrorland was. See how scary it is, kids? Come to Horrorland. Yeah, you know, it's interesting. As far as the whole kind of lore thing behind it goes, it's quite fun. The packs weren't that bad either with the items they got going on here, so they kind of gave some interesting items that we'll give it credit for. It just, I wish it was more. Like, I think I mentioned it, it feels like you kind of had a nice meal, like a nice small meal, and you're like, okay, where's the rest of it? It's like, what do you mean the rest of it? That was it. So it's one of those. It's like, oh, I wish there was a little bit bigger plate, but, you know, we get what we get. But yeah, that's the Return to Horrorland aspect. And because of that, you probably have a good idea what number one's going to be. So let's talk about that now. In first place, at number one, is the Horrific Anniversary. To celebrate Goosebumps' 30 years of doing books and scaring kids, they finally made it to be able to do an update celebrating it. This wasn't based on any particular book. This was basically referencing the whole series as a whole and to celebrate its milestone, the fact that they was able to kind of be here for its 30th anniversary milestone. And the way they did it was probably one of the most unique ways possible by being able to have it not only be hosted within the month when it was turning 30, but they introduced a character into the game called Eric Affenby, who is a pen name pseudonym for R.L. Stine. This was their sneaky way of bringing the main author behind the book series into the game's lore. And they made him special by the fact of making him bigger than everyone else to kind of be like, ooh, he's larger than life. But not only that, but the whole aspect behind it was kind of fun indeed. The story was interesting and all that. The items they introduced wasn't a whole lot, and it wasn't too interesting. I'll give it credit. The items were not too interesting. But the reason why I kind of did this world justice was, for one thing, the story and the little Easter eggs they got in this game was just so much. Like, if you knew R.L. Stine and some of the antics he got into, as well as some of the other stuff, you would know exactly what they're trying to do here and kind of give a little hints and lores. And I gave it, like, I love the appreciation of giving these little details in here and having fun with it, especially when it comes to the characters and the main character man himself, Eric Affenby. So that's fun. But the other big reason why this was so high on the list is because of the item they gave. Not only was it really easy to get this item, and even if you missed out, you would be able to get it for free or for cheap, but the fact of the matter is, this item is the only, to this date, item that you can get for free, quote unquote, that generated premium currency. Most of the time, in order to get a premium currency generator, you would have to buy a bundle, of which is the ATM machine or the bank, and that was limited to how much you can get. But this is the only free way of getting it, so that was a special thing for the time. And they did this by kind of referencing a book, which is like Slappy Birthday to You, which they couldn't do because technically at the time the Slappy World books were still going on, so you know, they couldn't do that at the point. But yeah, it's fun that they actually been able to kind of put this reference here, have fun with it, kind of use different styles, and you know, kind of made mentions of certain books and, you know, things. And again, the only downside is, again, shortness of it. Most of these were because of shortness. It's kind of sucky. But, you know, this was one of those, it could have been better if there was a lot more to it, but what they did was it was actually good enough. Like, they tried to reference as much as they could some of the highlights of the vid books that they had in the past, and vice versa. So, you know, they made an interesting, unique story to celebrate the 30 years, and they made it so that it was celebrating Founders Day, which is hilarious, but you know, it works for what it was, and quite honestly, I'm quite happy with this, and most people were too. I think they really did dig this update to be the best one, and I don't blame them. It's certainly one of the funnest ones, and yeah, for the most part, this update, there's not a whole lot to say. Like most of these updates are kind of explained themselves, but yeah, just everything about it was just perfect for as far as a small event is supposed to concern, and it did a good job, and it was really well done. And I'm glad that this update had to happen. I'm glad this game survived for that long to celebrate the 30 years anniversary. And yeah, that's, for the most part, this was by far to date, and the only to date, to be the best mini event this game has ever produced. So yeah, that's it for this particular video. I know this seems a bit short, but you have to understand these are short updates. And you might be thinking that, do you think I'm jumping the gun while doing this? Well, you know, with the success of what happened with the last update we had, which was the Trap in the Circus of Fear, something tells me that the Monster Pass is going to be here to stay. So, more likely than not, I'll be coming back to do this once the game's fully dead, or if for some reason they decide to change the update style again, but I doubt it. But for now, this is it. So, yeah, it was nice knowing you for the 2 years anyways, but you did his best. Short mini updates that has short mini life. Pretty fitting if I have to say so myself. But that's it for now. So hopefully you enjoyed this, as I did enjoy making it. I've been Grim, and I'll be seeing you next time. So, what was your favorite? Did you agree or disagree? I'd like to know down below.